name is michaelnotinger, and I'll be doing this class for you today on the chakras. So if you take visible light and you shine it through a prism, the light will divide into 7 colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and finally violet, the colors that we see in a rainbow. Similarly, if you take pure consciousness, or the force that powers everything in the universe, including us, and you shine it through an etheric prism, the consciousness itself will divide into 7 different frequencies of experience we know as a 7-chakra system. So chakras are energy wheels, or vortexes of energy that power our consciousness at a non-physical level. They're at the core of everything we experience, and on a physical level, they're endocrine glands, which secrete hormones that vastly alter our experience of objective reality, and they're also bundles of nerve fibers that produce electrical activity throughout the human physical vehicle. So chakra is a Sanskrit word that means energy wheel, and Sanskrit is the ancient language of India that has many associations with modern spirituality, modern New Age movement, and also modern science. So we have 7 primary chakras within the body, 5 primary chakras outside the body, and countless minor chakras within and outside of the physical body. For the sake of this class, we're primarily focusing on the 7 primary chakras within the body because that is more than enough information to cover in one class. But if you're interested to know the specifics of the primary chakras within and outside the body, so within the body, the 7 primary chakras are root, sacral, solar plexus, heart, throat, third eye, and crown, running up the spine, which correspond to survival, sexuality, power, love, expression, perception, and then pure consciousness. And then outside the physical body, we have chakras that correspond to our cosmic identity. So above the head is something called the soul star chakra, which corresponds to the route to the next world and our higher self and the non-physical dimensions to a large degree. Above that is an earth planetary chakra. So there's a chakra also at the base of the feet called the earth star chakra, and so the earth star chakra and the root chakra combined correspond more to the core of the earth and also the surface of the earth on a physical level, whereas the earth planetary chakra that is above the head, that corresponds more to the earth as a giant electromagnetic planetary system that extends many miles out into space with the earth's electromagnetic energy field that you can see through various scientific instruments and experiments. And then above that is a solar system chakra that corresponds to our solar system that we know in this area of the universe. Above that is a galactic chakra that corresponds to the Milky Way galaxy. Above that is a universal chakra, and then above that is a multiversal or collection of energy that corresponds to all the chakras of totality of the universe. Actually, millions of universes outside of this one, and this is only one universe inside the mass concept of what we know as source or God or consciousness or awareness. We're all portions of it. So you can activate the chakras through many different ways. We'll be going over more of the specifics of this later in this class. But I'd like to just go over a few of them now, and you can use the chakras to balance all aspects of yourself. So, for example, if you go to a nutritionist, they'll say, oh, well, your health is determined solely by your diet and nothing else. If you go to a doctor, they'll say your health is determined by if you're taking pharmaceutical drugs or not. If you go to an energy healer, they'll say that your health is determined by your spiritual alignment and how connected or not connected you are to the universe. But we're actually physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual beings. You can balance all aspects of yourself through working with your 7 chakra system, which correspond to all the aspects of being. You have to work with all of them to attain perfect harmony and balance and peace and happiness and joy within and without. So clothing is something fairly substantial that resonates with the chakras. So for example, right now I'm wearing mostly blue, green, and black, and I did that intentionally because I knew I had to do quite a bit of speaking tonight, and blue resonates with the throat chakra. Green resonates with the heart, which is the most important chakra, the center of love and compassion, which you get more into as to why that's so important later on. And then black corresponds to the root chakra, which is our foundation. And then you can also charge the chakras with sunlight, either by bathing in sunlight or doing something called sun gazing. So bathing in sunlight, that's pretty obvious. You go outside when the weather is nice, and you don't wear too many clothes, so you allow the sun to go through your skin, you absorb its energy, and then sun gazing will not blind you as long as you do it the first or last hour of the day. You can start out with about 10 seconds and gradually build over time, staring directly into the sun, which substantially charges the third eye chakra, which is center of perception. And then, sunbathing more charges the solar plexus chakra, even though it sends some energy to all the chakras to a certain extent. And it's also important to note and state at this point that no one totally understands exactly what chakras are or how they work. They are infinitely complex and paradoxical, and everything that I convey to you in this class is something from my own subjective experience. They are the most complex, paradoxical, strange, and interesting, and basically only things that really exist / don't exist because they're not totally physical. I find endless fascination studying them and meditating upon them. I'm sure that you will as well. And then also know and understand exactly what the sun is or how it works. So scientists have, sent probes out to the sun to take pictures of it and record readings from the sun's surface. We haven't actually sent a probe directly into it because it would, of course, vaporize the probe upon impact due to the high temperature variations around the sun, which are in the millions of degrees Fahrenheit. So food is also something that really substantially charges with chakras. You can go pretty much by the color of the food as to which chakra resonates with. Same thing with colors. For example, red apples would resonate with the root chakra, and green leafy vegetables resonate with the heart, and so on. You can also take what's called a color bath. So it's an organic fluid that you can buy and pour it into your bathtub, and it will change color. And whatever color that the water is, that will charge your chakras or a specific chakra depending upon the innate color that is within that specific frequency. And then, so whatever colors you're wearing or that you have in your home or that you have on your bed dramatically influence your chakras. So it's very important to notice what colors you're wearing, how they're affecting your reality, and also what colors you sleep with and have in your home, because those have massive effects on your realities, because colors are very, very powerful. Okay, so now let's talk about the lenses of the chakras. So chakras are like a lens to which everything in reality can be experienced in a plethora of ways. They are psychophysiological centers to which everything in reality can be experienced. We also grow up through the chakras. So when we're born, obviously our primary focus is upon solely the root chakra and survival. I need to do everything that I can to stay in this reality so I don't go back to the spirit world. And we're totally dependent upon our parents, our caregivers, whoever's in the immediate environment to provide for our survival needs. And then once we turn 18, we're told now you've got to provide for all your own survival needs yourself, which is, obviously not entirely true. Then once we grow up a little more, we move to the sacral chakra. We desire connection and interaction through relationships with our parents and peers and other people, and then the sacral chakra develops later on to the sexuality of romantic relationships that we see in adulthood and also in our teenage years if that develops at that time. Then we move to the solar plexus chakra. We desire to learn how to do things as a child. This happens for many children during the so-called terrible twos, where a child refuses to do anything they are told to do. Their favorite word is no, and they want to find their own temporal identity and refuse to do what anyone tells them to do in their outer reality like their parents. And then, as an adult, that evolves more into, well, I'm not going to do what an employer or a government official tells me to do. I'm a sovereign being, and no one's going to tell me how to live my own life. And then we evolve and grow a little more, and hopefully we evolve into the heart and desire love and connection with other people, and so on. And then if we are very fortunate, we evolve into the higher chakras and desire and obtain connection with the non-physical dimensions and observe, perceive, project, and receive the non-physical aspects of this particular reality. So most of the world lives in the material chakras of survival, sexuality, and power, but that is changing to a certain extent just because it's where we've been in the course of evolution as a species. You can see in the world today, most people are obsessed with survival, sexuality, and power, and if you try to have a conversation with them about anything outside of it, they're not really open to that because they're primarily unconscious. Most of the world is also focused far too much on surviving rather than thriving. So to truly thrive, we must access all the chakras. If you just want to survive, obviously just focus on the first three chakras, nothing else. If you really want to thrive and access all aspects of your being, I recommend accessing all of these chakras. So there are mirror walls or etheric barriers between the solar plexus and the heart chakra, and also between the crown chakra and the soul star chakra. So a mirror wall is an etheric barrier that provides a sort of gate between you and higher levels of consciousness until you reach a certain level of mastery. So to reach a certain level of mastery over the first 3 chakras to move into the heart and the other top 4 chakras, and you have to reach an even higher level of mastery than that to really start to cause you to access the chakras that exist outside of the physical body. So for example, when you're unconscious and you're locked in the first 3 chakras, your life basically sucks all the time. You can't remember who you are, or how this reality works, or what's going on here. You're basically like an animal or a machine, and you're just unconscious, reacting to absolutely everything that's going on in your external physical reality. But once you spiritually awaken, for most people it's through mass amounts of suffering, then you access the higher chakras and a whole new reality opens up for you, a whole new door where you're able to access much more than you were before. And so your life usually gets a lot better as a result of accessing the higher chakras. So, for the last several thousand years, the primary doorway to enlightenment for most people has been, unfortunately, tremendous amounts of unnecessary pain and suffering. But it is my sincerest hope that in the future we'll use knowledge to evolve to the higher levels of consciousness instead of just pure suffering, and then we can avoid unnecessary pain and conflict in this particular physical reality. For example, for myself, how I spiritually awakened, I experienced a tremendous amount of suffering, but I also, the specific incident that brought me out of my unconscious slumber was I found a YouTube series called Spirit Science, and almost immediately after that, my life got a lot stranger and more interesting. I started seeing UFOs all over this area almost every single night. I started meeting people who had these super strong energy fields that could manipulate the minds of other people with their minds. People would give me crystals for no reason. I had a super strong emotional pull towards meditation and yoga and fasting, and things just sort of took off from there. It was sort of like watching that YouTube series open up this Pandora's box for me on an entirely new reality. I can't ever go back to the reality I was in before. And so now I'd like to talk about the mirror wall between the crown and the soul star chakra. So once you master the first 7 chakras, which is very, very difficult to do, it usually takes about 10,000 hours of practice to get to that point, you can start to really constantly access the chakras that exist outside of the physical body, to know the specifics of what's going on in the non-physical dimension, which is dimension that exists in where we're not immersed in it within one physical temporal material form. So an example of this at a cultural scale was the ancient Egyptians, who were obsessed with the soul star chakra and the afterlife and religion and spirituality, trying to get to the next level of consciousness, basically the total opposite of the side that we have today in the United States, where we're obsessed with materialism and they're obsessed with immaterialism. And so now I'd like to talk about the male and female power centers. So obviously there are differences between men and women physically. There's also non-physical differences between men and women. So the male power center is the solar plexus chakra, and the female power center is the third eye. So men are primarily focused on their willpower, their temporal self, taking physical action, and what they need to do to control things or move forward in life. And women's primarily focused on perception of the internal world and emotions and the non-physical aspects of life and things like that. But this is only the way that we are naturally. So a man can easily develop his perceptive abilities just as a woman can develop her willpower. It just depends upon what you're mentally focusing on and what physical actions that you take. And then also, when we're born into a specific gender, we have certain innate strengths and weaknesses. So, for example, if you're born as a man, the physical aspects of life will typically be easier for you to deal with, because most men are imbued with greater size and physical strength than most women. Whereas if you're a woman, the non-physical aspects of life will typically be easier for you to deal with, but the physical life or aspects of life will be typically more difficult for you to deal with. And so you may say, well, obviously it's way better to incarnate as a man because you're in the physical dimension, you have to deal with physical things, and it's better to have size and physical strength so you can deal with the dangers of this dimension. But reality is actually much more non-physical than it is physical. So I would say that it's better to incarnate as someone who has a high level of mastery over the non-physical aspects of life, regardless of which gender you are, because the non-physical aspect is like much more substantial and far-reaching than the physical aspects of life. But there's obviously benefits and detriments to incarnating in a particular gender or species or time period, depending upon the innate incarnational aspects that you choose within this specific lifetime. So, just like us, the Earth also has chakra locations. There are ley lines or dragon paths around the Earth, just as there are energy meridians or nadis within us. So within us, we have nadis and energy meridians, which look kind of like veins and arteries that are made of energy that connect the chakras and different energy centers. And then on the Earth, they're called ley lines or dragon paths. And the Earth also has chakra locations, but they're not necessarily spaced out the same as they are within biological organisms. And all biological organisms have chakra systems to a certain degree. So your dog has chakras, so does your cat, so does your pet plant, or whatever beings that you have within your home, and then as does everything else that is alive. And everything is alive to a certain extent, it's just differentiated with different levels of life force. So for example, unicellular organisms have a very low level of life force energy, low vibrational frequency with them. They're not very complex or self-aware, whereas at the opposite end of the spectrum, humans and extraterrestrials vibrate at a much higher electromagnetic or vibrational frequency, and so much more complex and self-aware, and we're imbued with much greater levels of source energy and information and capabilities and flexibilities. So there are megalithic sites all around the planet, which are these ancient megalithic structures that no one knows how they're made, that are at these specific ley lines, dragon paths, nodal points, and chakra locations. So there's a 10,000-mile ring around the Earth that connects all these massive megalithic structures that no one knows how they're made, like the pyramids and tombs in Egypt, Göbekli Tepe, Teotihuacan, Baalbek, Easter Island, the pyramids in China, and various other locations. So there's a tremendous amount of evidence that there was some kind of massive, super advanced global civilization about 10 to 13,000 years ago. It was wiped out by some kind of massive global worldwide flood. And we call that civilization today words like Atlantis or Mu or Lemuria. There's a tremendous amount of evidence that civilization existed, and also there were a much higher level of awareness and technological advancement we were even at today, because we cannot recreate the same buildings, architecture, and tools that they could today. So, for example, at the pyramids in Egypt, there are stones made of granite, which is one of the hardest stones known on the planet, weighs about 100,000 pounds, and is very difficult to sculpt, even with our modern technology. It would take a dozen of our largest movable cranes to position into a specific architectural structure today. And then the ancient Egyptians also constructed various works of art and tools and such that we cannot recreate. So it looks like they used some kind of laser to make it, but obviously they didn't have that at the time. And there's a book called Seth Speaks that was channeled from the non-physical dimensions by Jane Roberts, which says that the pyramids in Egypt and other ancient megalithic structures were actually created by a type of sound technology that we don't have access to today, that would create a mass canceled effect upon atomic matter. Although we do have today a type of technology that can create a mass canceled effect on atomic matter using not sound but electricity. So in 1921, Thomas Townsend Brown and Paul Allen Beefield discovered the Beefield-Brown effect, where they found they could run a high-level electrical voltage with a low amperature current through a physical object. The object would basically weigh nothing. As a result, when an object weighs nothing, it accelerates at any speed. It's basically anti-gravity technology. This technology was then seized and harnessed by the US government, and then basically went black, and now is compartmentalized and sequestered in what are called unacknowledged special access projects, which are quasi-governmental, quasi-corporate entities that have access to extremely advanced technology and information, some of which is a result of reverse engineering crashed extraterrestrial vehicles from other solar systems. They have something called an electric magnetic gravitic propulsion system, which is a disc type vehicle that can go fast and speed of light, which uses this mass-cancelled electrical current sound technology. I'm sorry, it's just electrical current technology that doesn't use sound, or at least sound that we can hear with our physical ears. Whereas the ancient Egyptians use sound technology we can't hear with our physical ears. So the Earth's root chakra is located at Mount Shasta in California. And as you can see, this chakra is definitely out of balance. Today, Americans are for the most part extremely materialistic, ungrounded, do not honor the earth or life forms, and are basically living up in their heads most of the time and focused on things that are totally physical and material in nature. But that is changing. To a certain extent, there's a growing number of conscious beings in this country and also in other countries around the world. And so in the past, when the root chakra was imbalanced, the Native Americans safeguarded the land. They did rituals to harmonize themselves with the energy of the earth and harmonize the earth's energy. And then the Europeans came to this area of the world and said, so we need you guys to go ahead and stop doing your tribal rituals and convert to Christianity. We're going to take over this land. I'm sure that went over well with the Native Americans at that time. And so the Earth's sacral chakra is at Lake Titicaca in Peru. And this is also where the Earth's Kundalini is now concentrated. So Kundalini, which we'll get into in greater depth later on, is a serpent-like energy that runs up the spine to activate the chakras. It's just like we have a Kundalini that runs up our spine to activate our chakras. The Earth also has a Kundalini that is concentrated at one specific place on the surface of the Earth, and it shifts every 2,000 years approximately. So until recently, the Earth's Kundalini was concentrated at the Tibetan region of Asia, where you can see with the Tibetan Buddhists that they have a very high level of understanding of spirituality and spiritual concepts, and they had mastered meditation and could do multiple voices at the same time with their voice through various chants, and a very high level understanding of the non-physical aspects of our reality. And now it's shifted to the Peruvian area of South America, and you can see that's happening today because there's a tremendous push in South America, particularly in Peru, towards spirituality, spiritual concepts, meditation, yoga, and also entheogens. So in Peru specifically, they use something called ayahuasca, which is a brew from the shamanic traditions of South America that contains DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, which is a substance that allows you to access the non-physical dimensions of reality and see what's going on behind the physical. And DMT primarily resonates with the pituitary and pineal glands, the third eye and crown chakras. And so if you have a low level of control of your mind, you consume ayahuasca, there's a high probability to lose control of your mind and your bowels and your actions and your words, and you may freak out for long periods of time and start screaming or something similar. Whereas if you have a high level of control of your mind, you consume ayahuasca and you have a significant amount of experience in spirituality and meditation and so on, you'll typically have much more harmonious interaction with ayahuasca or any other entheogenic substance. So if you consume an entheogenic substance, it's typically better to consume it in a ceremonial setting or ritualistic setting where everyone around you has specific intention. If you energetically prepare the space and in preparation beforehand, you're doing it to either heal yourself or evolve your consciousness and extend your spiritual abilities. Whereas if you just, consume DMT or mushrooms at a party, there's a much higher probability that you'll have an intensely undesirable experience as a result of it, because it is an extremely powerful substance that reacts to your intentions. And it's not something that you should really just consume lightly, because entheogens are some of the most powerful substances that we can possibly consume on this planet. And so now I'd like to move on to the Earth's solar plexus chakra, which is located at the Uluru Kata Juta in Australia, which is near where they have some Aboriginal peoples there who are operating a different level of consciousness than we are today. So there are 5 levels of sentient consciousness which are differentiated by a chromosomal content, a physical height, and whether it is pure or chaotic. So the Aboriginals are still operating at the first level of consciousness, which is 4 to 6 feet tall, has 42 and 2 chromosomes, and is a pure level of consciousness. And then most of humanity stays at the second level of sentient consciousness, which has 44 and 2 chromosomes, is 5 to 7 feet tall, and is obviously a chaotic level of consciousness. And you can see there's a tremendous amount of chaos, conflict, and war today. We're now evolving into the third level of sentient consciousness, which is also called Christ consciousness, which is the level of consciousness that Christ was at approximately 2,000 years ago, which will be approximately 10 to 16 feet tall, with an elongated skull, have 46 and 2 chromosomes, be a pure level of consciousness once again. And so there's a Tool song called 46 and 2, which is about this level of consciousness, which I highly recommend, which is a rock song that you can find on the internet. And then also in the past, there were 2 pharaohs in ancient Egypt who were at this third level of consciousness, which were Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti. So Akhenaten was 15 feet tall with an elongated skull, and his wife Nefertiti was 12 feet tall with an elongated skull. And he tried to put a new type of spirituality and societal structure on the Egyptian people, but they basically resisted it and killed him. So he told these people who've become quite unconscious that, you don't have to worship all these gods with animal heads. God is within you, and you can just access that through meditation. And I said, I really, really like you, man. And the priests didn't like him because, the people were giving their power to them and saying, priests, tell me how spirituality works, how to access God within myself, or how to access God outside myself. And then the military didn't like him either because he told the military, you can't just go around killing people for no reason. You have to just defend yourself if necessary and not just go out starting wars. The military didn't like him either, and so they basically killed him as a result of his radical views. And then above the third level of sentient consciousness, the fourth level, which is 30 to 35 feet tall, has 48 and 2 chromosomes is a chaotic level of consciousness. And then above that is the fifth and final level of sentient consciousness, which is 50 to 60 feet tall, has 50 and 2 chromosomes as a pure level of consciousness. Once again, and one may ask, well, why are there any chaotic levels of consciousness at all? And that's because you have to experience both polarities in order to truly know the self, which I'll get more into as to why that's necessary later on. And so now I can transition to the Earth's heart chakra. Is located at Glastonbury, Shaftesbury in England. There's quite a bit of green in the country of England. It's no coincidence that the heart chakra there also corresponds to the color green. There's also thousands upon thousands of crop circles in England that you can find in this area that were created by extraterrestrial beings primarily. So, obviously there's crop circles created by people in that area of the world which are not very well done. But then there's extremely intricate and complicated crop circles that were made by extraterrestrials because no one knows how they're made, and then they're made in these beautiful sacred geometric patterns. They have a picture of an extraterrestrial face, something similar to that. There's a video you can see online of these little balls of light creating a crop circle in about 30 seconds. The extraterrestrials place crop circles primarily over this area of the world because that's the Earth's heart chakra, and the heart is the most important chakra. And you can see the heart's been closed in that area of the world for a long period of time, but that is changing to a certain extent now because there's people who are spiritually awakening in that area of the world. Now I'd like to talk about the Earth's throat chakra, which is located directly over the Great Pyramid in Egypt. That is not a coincidence. The ancient Egyptians knew that, and they intentionally built the pyramid of the chakras over that location to harmonize themselves with the throat chakra. And you can see the ancient Egyptians definitely had an open throat chakra when they constructed these buildings. They were extremely intelligent people who had a master of sound, vibrations, and technology. And then you can see the Earth's throat chakra is primarily closed today, although that is changing to a certain extent. And then also in this picture you can see the Sphinx, and there's some interesting information we have about the Sphinx now that you can see there's erosion at the top of the Sphinx, which you can also see at most other places in Egypt and ancient Egyptian structures and buildings. But then if you look at the base of the Sphinx, there's a different type of erosion, which is water erosion, which can only be created by thousands upon thousands of years of continuous rainfall. And there's not been a mass amount of continuous rainfall in this area of the world for thousands of years, at least 10,000 years, which means that the Sphinx has to be at least 10,000 years old, which means it was created by some kind of super advanced global society that we're not too sure about how they operated yet at this point. And so now I'd like to talk about the Earth's third eye chakra, is located at Qa Malaxia in Iran. And this chakra is mobile. It shifts every 2,000 years, approximately the end of each age. And so we have an age for each sign of the zodiac. So now we're transitioning from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius, or the golden age, whereas we've been focused primarily on emotional aspects for like the last 2,000 years. Now we're focusing more on mental aspects, and more mental species. And you can see the Earth's third eye chakra is primarily closed today just because there's a great deal of unconsciousness in this area of the world, but that is changing to a certain extent as humanity continues to wake along the pathway of personal and collective evolution. So finally, Earth's crown chakra is located at Mount Kailash in Tibet. And as I enumerated previously, this is not a coincidence that the people in that area have a very high level of understanding of spiritual practices and have a very pure form of Buddhism and spiritual practices and such. And they master meditation and can make multiple sounds with their voices at once. That's because the Earth's crown chakra is at that particular location, which seems to still be open today because most people in that area are still quite pure, even though Tibet has been seized by the Chinese government to a certain degree. So now I'd like to talk about the chakra shift that occurred in the United States in the 1960s. So In the 1960s, there was a massive consciousness shift in the United States. People moved from, in the 1950s and before then, being extremely materialistic and obsessed with survival, sexuality, and power, to opening up to the heart and the higher chakras, experimenting with psychedelics and new types of music and forms of expression, meditation, yoga, and so on. And of course, governmental authorities and corporate figures and banking officials tried to shut that down. Of course, they were unsuccessful. The damage done by Jimi Hendrix and Jim Morrison and all the other famous figures at that time were able to significantly move forward humanity on the pathway of collective evolution due to the chakra shift. So, there is a chakra focus in each country of the world as well. So the United States was primarily focused on the solar plexus chakra and lower chakras until about the 1960s. They moved more into the heart at that time. And then in India, they've been focused on the higher chakras much longer than we have because it's an older country. So the newer that a country is, usually the more it's materially focused, and the older that a country is, typically more immaterially that it's focused. So India is one of the oldest countries in the world, so it's a very strong spirituality. It's actually super imbalanced towards the spiritual polarity. And the United States is a newer country, one of the newest countries in the world, is more imbalanced towards the material polarity, although it is changing to a certain extent. And so there's two types of imbalance that you can acquire in this reality in terms of material and immaterial. So an harmonic imbalance comes from when you're way too focused on the material aspects of existence. You're obsessed with survival and sexuality and power and how big is my house and how beautiful is my spouse and how big are my muscles, and you're just only focused on what's going on outside of you. You're not really paying attention to anything that's going on inside or on the non-physical level as well, because you can't remember that the spirit even exists. And then the opposite of that would be a Luciferian imbalance, where you were super focused on the spiritual aspects of life, like love, expression, perception, and consciousness. And you may, be totally homeless and living in a cardboard box or on the beach and compete with animals for food, but you feel so high in universal energy that it doesn't really matter to you. Whereas if you have a material imbalance, you have lots of material things like a big house and lots of money that may feel totally empty and powerless and depressed inside because you can't remember what this reality is about or how it works. And so in order to truly thrive in this reality, you have to be energetically balanced and access both polarities of self, the spiritual and the material, simultaneously at the same time in order to truly thrive and access all of your capabilities. So now I'd like to talk about the chakras and evolution. So evolution is the purpose of the physical universe. We're all portions of God or consciousness or source of the universe, and it does not know what it is. It does not know what it is because it is infinitely complex, paradoxical, contains complementary and contradictory aspects